My name is Alina, and I'm 27 years old. I was born in Austin, Texas, where everything seems big except for me. I always felt a little too small, a little too different from everyone around me. From the outside, I guess I look like anyone else, except for one thing, the birthmark on my face. It starts at my temple, runs down past my cheek, and fades into my jawline. It's large, dark, and for as long as I can remember, it's been the first thing people notice about me. The second thing they notice is how uncomfortable they feel when they realize they've been staring. I used to be able to ignore it, but after years of being the object of stares, whispers, and the occasional pointed finger, it became harder to pretend that I wasn't different. Growing up in Texas, the pressure to fit in was relentless. It was a place where beauty was often defined by a flawless face, a perfect smile, and the ability to blend into the crowd. I was none of those things. My birthmark was a constant reminder that I didn't belong, that I wasn't perfect enough for the world I inhabited. At first, it was small things. Kids at school would avoid sitting next to me, or they'd laugh at my appearance when they thought I couldn't hear. But as I got older, it became more insidious. I wasn't just different, I was flawed. My birthmark made me feel less than, like I didn't deserve the same treatment as others. I learned to fight through it, to push through the stares, the pity, the discomfort. I worked harder than anyone to prove I was worth their attention, but even then, it always felt like there was something missing. I had recently gotten engaged to Matt, a man who loved me despite everything. He saw beyond the birthmark, beyond the insecurities I hid behind it, and he made me feel like I was enough. His family, however, was a different story. They were wealthy, polished, and had an idea of what their son's future wife should look like. The first time I met his parents, they smiled at me politely, but I could see the way their eyes lingered on my face. The way they couldn't seem to look me in the eye for too long. I told myself I was imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were looking for something to judge me for. As the wedding approached, the tension started to mount. I had hoped, foolishly, that the closer we got to the big day, the more his family would warm up to me, but it didn't happen. Instead, I found myself fighting harder to fit into their mold, to make them see me as more than just the girl with the birthmark. I tried dressing a certain way, speaking a certain way, even changing the way I wore my makeup to appear more acceptable in their eyes. But no matter how hard I tried, the discomfort in their gaze never faded. The last straw came when we sat down for a final meeting to discuss the details of the wedding. His mother, in the most passive-aggressive way possible, commented that my appearance might be too much for some of their more traditional guests. Her words were laced with a thin veneer of politeness, but the message was clear. I wasn't what they had expected, and I was far from the kind of woman they had hoped for their son. The sting was instant. It wasn't the first time I'd heard it, but hearing it from her felt different. She wasn't just another stranger who didn't know me. She was the woman who was supposed to be welcoming me into her family, and instead, she was rejecting me because of the way I looked. I sat there, silent, holding my breath as the room around me seemed to close in. My hands gripped the edges of the table, and for a moment, I could hardly hear the words that followed. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat, the overwhelming sense of rejection washing over me. It wasn't just the birthmark, it was everything that came with it: the insecurity, the self-doubt, the years of trying to prove I was worthy despite my appearance. I had spent so much time convincing myself that I was enough, that I didn't need to fit into their mold, but sitting there, listening to them talk about me like I was a liability, a mistake they had to tolerate, shattered all of that. I wasn't just hurt, I was humiliated. I could feel my face flush, the heat spreading from my chest to my neck. But I refused to let them see it. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. I nodded along, pretending that everything was fine, pretending that their words hadn't cut me deep. But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't the life I had dreamed of. This wasn't the wedding I had imagined. I had wanted to feel welcomed, to feel like I was part of Matt's family. Instead, I felt like an outsider, like the girl who would never be enough. When the meeting ended, I excused myself, barely able to hold back the tears. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to breathe. As I stepped out into the cool evening, away from their judgment and their stares, a quiet rage built inside me. I had always let their words break me. I had always let their rejection shape how I saw myself. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let their shallow judgment dictate who I was or what I deserved. They had seen the surface, but they hadn't seen the strength inside me. They hadn't seen what I was capable of. They would The following days after the meeting felt like I was living in a fog, a constant pressure weighing on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every time I saw Matt, I could tell something was off, but I didn't know how to talk about it. He tried to reassure me, telling me his family didn't mean it like that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been said that couldn't be unsaid. I kept replaying the meeting over and over in my head, trying to make sense of their words, trying to convince myself that they hadn't meant what I thought they meant, but every time I remembered his mother's face, the way her eyes lingered on my birthmark with that mixture of confusion and distaste, I felt the sting all over again. I wasn't sure when I began dreading the wedding plans, but by the time the final days were approaching, the thought of it filled me with a sinking dread. The family was still making decisions I didn't feel included in. Matt tried to make me feel better, assuring me that everything would be fine, but there was a tension in the air whenever his parents came up. They didn't even realize it, but they had already made me feel like I was an outsider in my own engagement. The wedding, the one thing that was supposed to be mine, felt like something I was being forced into. It all came to a head one evening. Matt and I were sitting together, planning the seating arrangements when the topic of the guest list came up. His mom had decided on the final numbers, but when I saw the list, I noticed something strange. My parents had been put at the far end of the room, near the back, in a place that felt more like an afterthought than an important guest. I tried to stay calm, to brush it off, but the frustration built up inside me. I confronted Matt about it. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw the conflict in his expression. He knew there was something wrong. His family hadn't just made it clear that they didn't want me, they had shown it. They had placed my parents, the people who loved me and raised me, as if we were insignificant. It wasn't just a seating arrangement, it was a message, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The weight of it all hit me like a wave. I had fought so hard to fit into their world, to be good enough for their son, for their family, but nothing ever seemed to be enough. I wasn't the perfect woman they imagined for him. I wasn't their idea of a Tunla. No matter how hard I tried to fit in, I would always be the one with the birthmark, the one who didn't fit the mold. The feeling of rejection was suffocating. I could hear their whispers again, the judgment, the unspoken criticism. It wasn't just about the seating arrangement anymore. It was about everything. It was about how they saw me, how they thought they could control who was worthy of their respect. Matt's voice broke through my thoughts, but it didn't bring me any comfort. He apologized for the mix-up, but I knew it wasn't just a mistake. They had made a decision about me before I even walked through the door. This wasn't about my appearance anymore, it was about how they saw me. They had already dismissed me, just like they had always done, and now, they were doing it publicly. I felt my heart sink as I looked at him. It's not about the seating, Matt, it's about the fact that they've already decided what I am. I'm not part of their world. I never will be. His face dropped, and I saw the sadness in his eyes. He hadn't wanted to believe it, but I knew he could see it now. The truth was there, hanging between us like a heavy cloud. His family didn't accept me, not fully, not the way I wanted them to. And no matter how much I loved him, no matter how much I wanted to make this work, their rejection felt like it was slowly choking me. I stood up, my hands trembling as I tried to keep my composure. I couldn't sit there anymore. I couldn't pretend like everything was okay. I don't know if I can do this, Matt. I don't know if I can keep pretending to be someone I'm not just to make them happy. My voice was shaking, and I could feel the tears pricking at my eyes, but I didn't want to cry in front of him. I didn't want him to see how much it hurt. I walked to the window, staring out into the night, trying to calm the storm raging inside of me. The anger, the frustration, the sadness, it was all a heavy weight pressing down on me. I wasn't just hurt by his family anymore. I was hurt by the fact that I had let them make me feel small for so long. I had tried so hard to be what they wanted me to be, but in the end, nothing I did would ever make me good enough for them. I could hear Matt approaching, his footsteps quiet behind me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, and I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of his touch, but it wasn't enough to make me feel whole again. I had spent my whole life trying to fit into someone else's expectations, but now I was realizing that I could never please everyone. The decision was mine now. One had to stop pretending. I had to stop letting their opinions control me. It wasn't just about my appearance. It was about who I was, and who I was meant to become. Matt's voice broke through my thoughts once again. What do you want to do? He asked, the question filled with concern. But in that moment, I knew that it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me and what I was willing to accept. I turned around to face him, my eyes clear. I want to take control of my life, Matt. I'm not going to let them tell me who I am anymore. And I'm not going to let them decide what I deserve. The silence that followed was thick, but it was the silence of understanding. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. I wasn't going to let their rejection define me. It was time to make a choice, and I was done letting them make it for me. I spent the next few days in a fog, each minute slipping by as I tried to put the pieces together. The rejection, their dismissal, it all kept running in my mind like a broken record. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear the words from the meeting, the ones that made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I would never be enough for them. I kept thinking about the way Matt's family had looked at me, how his mother's eyes lingered on my birthmark like it was some kind of flaw. She couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the seating arrangement, or the whispered comments. It was the look they gave me, the look that said, without a word, that I didn't belong. I knew it was coming. I had always known that one day I would face this moment, when I would have to choose between staying in a place where I wasn't fully accepted, or standing up for myself and walking away. But I never thought it would hurt this much. The pain wasn't just from what they said. It was from the fact that I had spent so long trying to prove to myself and to them that I was worthy. That despite the birthmark, despite the way I looked, I was capable, I was valuable. But no matter how much I tried, how much I gave, it was never enough to erase the judgments they had already made. I started to feel the toll this was taking on me, the constant second-guessing, the questioning of my worth. It was like I had built my whole life around this idea that if I just tried hard enough, if I just made myself perfect enough, I would finally fit in. But the more I tried to conform to their standards, the further I felt from who I was. The more I gave them, the more they took, and in the process, I lost pieces of myself that I could never get back. I could feel the stress in my body, my shoulders were tight, my neck stiff. Every conversation with Matt, every interaction with his family, felt like I was walking on eggshells. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that I was overthinking things, but the truth was clear. To me, the rejection wasn't just about my appearance, it was about how they saw me. It was about how I didn't belong in their world, how they had no room for someone like me. I could feel it in their words, in their actions. I could see it in the way they talked to me, like I was an outsider, someone who didn't quite fit in. I spent most of the week avoiding Matt's family, retreating into my thoughts. I couldn't handle their pitying glances, their attempts to make me feel better by pretending it didn't matter. It mattered. It mattered more than I could explain. I wasn't just hurt by their rejection, I was devastated by how much I had allowed it to affect me. I had worked so hard to prove that I was more than my appearance, more than the way they saw me, but all of that effort seemed to evaporate the moment they saw my face. The birthmark had always been part of who I was, but now it felt like the only thing they saw. The emotional toll was harder to bear than I had anticipated. The constant strain of trying to live up to their expectations had worn me down in ways I hadn't realized. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore, it was about my sense of self. My ability to exist in a world that valued superficial qualities over substance. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw it, my birthmark, my imperfection, and I couldn't help but feel that maybe they were right, maybe I wasn't enough, maybe their judgments were valid. I wanted to scream, to fight against it, but the exhaustion made it hard to summon the energy. I had tried to fight back before, but now I was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of fighting. Tired of hoping that maybe one day they would finally see me for who I truly was. I spent hours scrolling through wedding plans, trying to focus on something else, trying to make sense of the mess that my life had become. But every time I thought about the wedding, I saw their faces, his family, sitting there with their disapproving looks, their whispered judgments. I couldn't shake it. The idea that this one day, this moment that was supposed to be about us, had been tainted by their rejection. By their belief that I wasn't worthy to be part of their world. The strain was starting to show. My energy was gone. I felt numb, like I was moving through life in a fog, disconnected from everything around me. I didn't want to feel this way. I didn't want to let their rejection destroy me. But how could I fight against something that seemed so deeply ingrained in their perception of me? How could I convince them of my worth when they had already made up their minds? I stopped answering calls from Matt's family. I couldn't handle the small talk, the well-meaning but empty comments they made about how everything would be fine. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand. I wasn't just fighting to prove myself to them, I was fighting to reclaim who I was. to remember that I was more than just what they saw on the surface. I wanted to believe in myself again, to feel strong, but right now, I felt like I was crumbling. I knew that something had to change. I couldn't keep letting them control my emotions, control how I saw myself. I needed to find a way to break free from this cycle. But I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to fix the damage that had been done. All I knew was that I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't keep trying to please them, to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. I had to find a way to stand up for myself, to stop letting their judgments define me. But how? Where did I begin? The days felt like they were stretching into weeks. The weight of everything, Matt's family's judgment, their subtle rejection, my own self-doubt, was becoming unbearable. Every time I thought about the wedding, every time I tried to imagine walking down the aisle, I felt a knot in my stomach. It wasn't just the thought of them judging me anymore. It was the realization that they would always see me as other, as someone who didn't fit into their world. I had tried to prove myself, tried to make them see that I was more than the birthmark on my face, more than the way I looked. But now, it felt like I was trapped in a box that I couldn't escape. Matt and I hadn't talked about it much in the past few days. He was busy with wedding preparations, and I was busy pretending that everything was fine. But I knew that things weren't fine. They hadn't been fine for a while now. Every time I looked at him, I saw the conflict in his eyes. He didn't know what to say anymore. He didn't know how to fix it. I could feel him pulling away, even though he didn't mean to. He was stuck in the middle, torn between me and his family, unable to bridge the gap between the two worlds. I could see it in his face, in the way he hesitated whenever he mentioned his parents. The tension was thick between us, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was okay. I woke up one morning with a heavy heart, the familiar feeling of dread already settling in. I had been avoiding talking to his family, avoiding the wedding preparations. I kept telling myself it would be fine, that once the wedding day arrived, everything would fall into place. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There was too much unresolved pain, too much anger, too much rejection that had been left unspoken, and it was eating away at me. I had always prided myself on being strong, on pushing through the tough moments. But I didn't feel strong anymore. I felt like I was losing myself, like I was disappearing into this version of me that I didn't recognize, someone who was always apologizing for who she was, always shrinking to make others feel comfortable. I stood in front of the mirror that morning, staring at my reflection, searching for some sign of the woman I used to be, the one who was confident, who could stand up for herself, who wasn't afraid to walk into any room with her head held high. But all I saw was a woman who was trying too hard to fit into a world that would never accept her. I hated the way my birthmark seemed to define me. I hated the way people looked at me like I was a problem, something to be fixed. It wasn't just the judgment of others anymore, it was the judgment I had begun to internalize. I had started to believe, somewhere along the way, that maybe I wasn't worthy of this life. Maybe I wasn't worthy of Matt, of the love he offered me. Maybe I wasn't worthy of a family who would accept me for who I was. I couldn't stop. The tears that started to fall, the overwhelming sense of helplessness crashing over me. I had fought so hard to be seen as more than my appearance, more than the thing that made people uncomfortable. But what if it was all in vain? What if this was the life I was destined for, always fighting to be seen, always fighting to prove my worth, but never being enough? I thought about walking away. I thought about leaving everything behind, Matt, the wedding, the expectations, the rejection, and just disappearing. Maybe it would be easier. Maybe it would be simpler to walk away and stop pretending that I could make things work in a world that didn't want me. But the thought of leaving Matt, of losing him, broke me. I loved him. I wanted to build a life with him, a future that wasn't defined by the judgments of others. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't just fighting for him, I was fighting for myself. I was fighting to reclaim my own sense of worth, to remind myself that I wasn't just the birthmark on my face. I was more than that. I had to face it. I couldn't keep running. I couldn't keep pretending like I was fine, like the hurt didn't matter. I couldn't let this moment define me. I couldn't let their judgment become my truth. I had to stand up for myself, to reclaim the power I had lost somewhere along the way. But how? Where did I even begin? The truth was, I had no idea. All I knew was that I couldn't stay like this any longer. I couldn't keep shrinking. I couldn't keep apologizing for who I was. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was the wedding organizer. I hesitated before picking it up, not sure what was coming next. "Alina, we need to talk," she said. I could hear the urgency in her voice. There's been an issue with the final arrangements, and I need you to make a decision. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. Another thing to deal with, another piece of the puzzle that I wasn't ready to face. But I couldn't avoid it anymore. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. The weight of everything, the wedding, the judgment, the pain was crashing down on me. But I knew, deep down, that I had to face it. I had to take control of my life, my future, before it slipped away from me entirely. I sat there, the phone still pressed against my ear, the world around me a blur. The words from the organizer seemed distant at first, muffled by the heaviness of my thoughts. My mind raced back to the moment when I first walked into Matt's family's worldly judgment in their eyes, the subtle dismissals. They had never seen me for who I truly was. And no matter how many times I tried to prove myself, it never felt like it was enough. I thought about the wedding, how it was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, but instead, it felt like an overwhelming burden. Everything had become about fitting in, about conforming to an ideal that wasn't mine. I was exhausted. My heart ached with the weight of trying to be someone I wasn't, of constantly measuring myself against a standard that only existed in the minds of people who barely knew me. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending to be the woman they wanted me to be. I wasn't some delicate accessory to be adjusted, shaped, and molded to fit a picture of perfection. I was more than that, and I was done hiding from the truth. As I sat there, taking slow breaths, the weight of my realization settled deep within me. I had spent so much of my life letting the judgments of others define me. From the moment I was old enough to understand the looks, the whispers, and the pity, I had internalized those feelings, convinced that I was the one who needed to change. I had tried to cover up my birthmark, to make myself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. I had sacrificed pieces of who I was just to make them comfortable. But I couldn't keep doing it. Not anymore. The room felt smaller as the realization hit me harder. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to earn their acceptance. I had spent too long bending to their will, changing pieces of myself to fit into a box that wasn't mine to begin with. I was tired of living in the shadows of their expectations. I was tired of apologizing for something that was a part of me. The truth was, if they couldn't accept me for who I was, flaws, birthmarks, tattoos, and all, then maybe they didn't deserve me at all. I took another breath, steadying myself. The decision was clear now. It wasn't just about the wedding, or Matt's family. It was about me. It was about taking control of my life, my future, and my happiness. I wasn't going to let their limited view of me define how I saw myself anymore. I was done trying to fit into their world. It was time to create my own. I stood up and paced around the room, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. There was no going back. I couldn't unhear the things they had said, but I could choose to stop letting them control me. I thought about Matt's face, his kindness, how much I loved him. But even more than that, I thought about what was at stake for me. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about the life I wanted to live, the future I wanted to build. I had spent too long being afraid of their judgment, too long living in the shadows of their opinions. It was time to step into the light and own who I was. I picked up my phone and called the organizer back. This time, my voice was steady, my resolve clear. Cancel the changes, I told her, as my heart pounded in my chest. I want to change the seating arrangement. I want my parents to be treated like they deserve to be treated. It was a small step, but it was the first one I had taken for myself in a long time. It felt good. It felt right. As I ended the call, I stood there, feeling the power of my decision settle into my bones. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was making a choice for myself, not for anyone else. It wasn't just about the seating, or the wedding, or Matt's family. It was about reclaiming my life, my voice, and my worth. I wasn't going to let them decide how I felt about myself anymore. I was done being their version of what was acceptable. I was going to be me. Unapologetically. I felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, anger, and empowerment. There was still a long road ahead, still many obstacles to face. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had the strength to face them. I wasn't perfect, but I didn't need to be. I was worthy of love, respect, and happiness, just as I was. And no one, not even Matt's family, could take that away from me. I sat down, my mind clear for the first time in days. I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders, the pressure of trying to please everyone slowly fading away. I wasn't going to let their rejection be my story. This was my life, and I was going to live it the way I wanted to. No more hiding, no more pretending. I was ready to face whatever came next on my terms. The morning of the wedding arrived, and as I stood in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. The weight of the past few weeks, of the decisions I had made, hung heavy in the air, but it didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like freedom. I had taken control, and now it was time to let everything fall into place. For once, I wasn't focused on how I looked or how others might perceive me. I wasn't trying to hide any part of myself. The birthmark on my face, the tattoos on my neck, the way my makeup was done, it was all a part of who I was. And I was done apologizing for it. I could feel the energy in the room shift as I prepared to leave the safety of the dressing area. I knew what was coming, and I was ready for it. Matt had been nervous too. We hadn't talked much the night before, and I could tell the pressure of the day was weighing on him. His family had been relentless, still pushing their expectations onto us, but I could see the look in his eyes. He knew. He knew what had to happen today, even if he couldn't fully understand why it had come to this. But in that moment, I knew he was there, standing beside me, ready to fight for us. As we walked down the aisle, I could feel the stares, the judgment. I could feel his family's eyes on me, the whispers starting to swirl behind me like they always did. I held my head high, my heart racing, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The truth had settled deep within me. I wasn't here to please anyone else. I was here for myself. This was my day, my moment. The room was filled with tension as I reached the front, but it wasn't the same kind of tension I had felt before. It wasn't the crushing weight of doubt or fear, it was the calm before a storm. I could feel it in the air. The moment was coming. Matt's family hadn't expected me to show up like this. They hadn't expected me to stand my ground. I could see the discomfort in their faces, the way they shifted in their seats as I took my place at the altar. They had hoped I would back down, that I would apologize, that I would shrink into the background like I had done before. But this time, I wasn't going to let them have that power over me. I could see the look on his mother's face, the thin veneer of politeness cracking. She had tried to smile, to pretend that everything was fine, but I could see through it. She was uncomfortable, and it wasn't just because of my appearance. It was because I had made a decision. I had chosen not to fit into their narrow mold. And that was something they couldn't ignore. The ceremony began. And the officiant's words faded into the background as I focused on what truly mattered. I had spent so long trying to make everyone else happy, trying to conform to their expectations. But now, I was making my own decisions. I wasn't doing this for them. I wasn't standing here to prove anything to Matt's family. I was standing here because I wanted to be with him. I wanted to build a life with him, one that was free from the judgment of others. The vows came next. As Matt spoke his words, I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and it reminded me why I had fought so hard to get to this point. But as I spoke my own vows, I could feel the weight of everything I had overcome. I wasn't just promising to love him, I was promising to love myself. To stand strong in the face of the world's judgment, and to never again let anyone's opinion of me define my worth. When the vows were exchanged, when the ceremony was finally over, there was a moment of silence. And in that silence, I knew something had shifted. It wasn't just about the marriage anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about showing myself and everyone in that room that I would no longer allow their judgments to control me. It wasn't just the birthmark or the tattoos. It was my strength, my resilience, and my ability to stand firm in who I was. As we walked back down the aisle together, Matt by my side, I could feel the eyes of his family on us, but it didn't matter anymore. They had to watch us, had to witness our love, our commitment. They had no choice but to see me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. And that realization, that quiet triumph, filled me with a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. They had seen me as an outsider, as someone unworthy of their respect. But now, they couldn't ignore me. I wasn't just Matt's wife. I wasn't just the girl with the birthmark. I was a woman who had fought for her place, for her voice, and I had finally found it. The reckoning wasn't loud, it wasn't a dramatic confrontation, it was quiet, subtle, but it was undeniable. I had stepped into my own power, and nothing, no one, could take that away from me. I had shown them that I was worthy, not because of my appearance, but because of who I was. And as Matt and I walked into our future, side by side, I knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more battles, more challenges, but I was ready. I had finally found the strength to face them.